Hello and welcome to the Non-Perfect Parents Club podcast. I'm Emma, a mama of two girls, an ex-nursery practitioner and the creator of the Non-Perfect Parents Club. The Non-Perfect Parents Club is all about support, honesty, truths, acknowledging that none of us can be perfect parents because it's impossible, and basically just speaking the unspoken. The only rule here is no judgment allowed. I love hearing people's stories. I love finding out about other parents, their family dynamics, their values and how they tick. So that is what this podcast is going to be. Some great honest conversations about parenting, hopefully delving into some nitty-gritty thoughts and feelings that will make us all laugh, cry and sigh a big sigh of relief. This episode is sponsored by Stingray's Swim School from 315 Health Club in Lancaster.
Places are available for swimming with Stingray's Swim School at 315 Health Club in Lancaster now. With group lessons suitable for babies from 9 weeks old through to school starts and older too. And with flexible ways to pay. Your child can develop their water confidence and learn to swim whilst having a splashing good time. Find out more. Call 237 315. Drop into 315 Caton Road, Lancaster. Or message the Stingray's 315 Swim School via Facebook.
Hello and welcome back to the Non-Perfect Parents Club podcast. Today I am joined by Ellie, who is a nurse and has her own period underwear and swimwear company called Nickeze. Hi Ellie, thank you for joining me. Shall we start with an introduction as to who you are and what you do?
Hi Emma, it's absolutely lovely to be here and getting to talk to you. So my name is Ellie Loftus. I live here in Galway in the west of Ireland and I'm a nurse by background. I also am a barrister as well. And sometimes people ask, well, what's the combination relevance to periods? Well, obviously the nursing is very relevant. But also as a barrister, you learn to be a very good advocate for people that don't have a voice. And I've tried to use that as wisely as I can in relation to girls with intellectual and physical disabilities with periods and the added challenges that they have. You might have seen recent articles in magazines and newspapers in relation to that, which I feel very kind of passionate about. But getting back to it, so I also have a Master of Science in Child and Adolescent Health as well. So that's very relevant to the teen periods and all the challenges and the, even things like period pain. And then I have 3 qualifications within my nursing. I'm general qualified, which is, everything. And then I did postgraduates in pediatrics and adolescents. That covers girls and boys, obviously up to the age of 18. And then I worked in pediatric intensive care then for 5 years of my career. And then I was a child and adolescent health development officer for a health board here in Ireland. So that's kind of my background in relation to, I suppose, the knowledge and expertise in relation to the topic that we're kind of discussing.
So what were your reasons for starting Nickeze?
Well, I suppose maybe the thought had been in my mind. I probably was rooted right back to my adolescent years, my early adolescence years. I was the only girl amongst 4 brothers. I had no sister. And I suppose it was the times when parents didn't really prep their daughters. Like it was kind of like a bit maybe at school or a bit from your friends, but it was never anything really kind of organized or structured. And I was very sporty. I was huge into athletics and basketball, and every sport that could happen, I was in the middle of it. And I remember periods being very, very difficult. Not that I had a lot of period pain or anything, but it was the whole period management that was difficult, like wearing pads. And they were flying around, like not being crude about it, but in your underwear while you were trying to play a game of basketball, and you were afraid the boys would see it because it was the PE skirts back then. There was kind of no real shorts. Girls wore PE skirts. You're too young, Emma, to remember any of that. And then it was also the fact that the pads crunched up. I was just like, thought of putting a tampon at that age for me was like, no, nothing's going anywhere near there. No, thanks. But the pads would scrunch up and then you'd have leaks and everything like that. It was the same thing with leaks at nighttime when you were turning around to sleep in the bed. And then what struck me was when my first daughter got her period, I was very struck by the fact that the challenges were identical. Nothing had kind of changed. And we were in modern day with so many modern approaches to everything. But things really hadn't moved on. Certainly not kind of in Ireland anyway. And it was still kind of your pads and tampons, which is great. And I would never knock anything like that. I think women should have choice. Girls should have choice. They should use whatever it is that makes them happy. Obviously, you'd like to see them using something environmentally friendly, like reusable period underwear, but that's a personal choice. And that was kind of really the beginning of it, that I kind of saw her having the same kind of fears of period leaks, the same fears of kind of like socially something happening like that. And that was really the beginning of it. So the thoughts came to me during the lockdown COVID, and I was working through that. But I think I had more time on my hands because I wasn't running around bringing the kids to school and all the activities. So I kind of had time to sit down and research it. And then when I started looking, I couldn't find anything really that was that kind of super absorbent that would deal with really heavy periods, or deal with difficult periods, deal with periods in sport. Just wasn't there. So I decided to kind of, Australia and the US was kind of a little bit more ahead than, I guess, maybe even Europe on this. But I still couldn't really find what I was looking for. So I decided, well, sure, look, what do? You build it yourself. So that's where I started. And I actually started building the designs myself. So, that was kind of a combination, I guess, of nursing knowledge and also being a mom and being a female and knowing what periods are like, especially in sport. And I was very passionate about all the challenges and reasons why girls leave sport. And we see a huge fallout of girls around that time when they get their period. A lot, like say, for example, a very sad story would be a woman that made contact with me, and she was just asking about the period swimwear, and she was saying, she was 42, and she said, is that something that I could wear? And I said, of course. I said, I know I focus kind of on teen girls, but it's for everybody, of course. And then she said, I gave up swimming when I was 12 years old, when I got my period. And that is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So you can imagine, from the age of 12 to the age of 42, to have given up like what she was probably really good at, and because of her period. And I'm sure she went swimming on her non-period days, but she gave up competitive swimming because she could not deal with that. She couldn't deal with that every month. So that kind of sums up exactly where I'm coming from, that we have to do better. We just have to do better.
Yeah, and it was only the other day, I didn't go back and read it, but I saw it was the heading of an article, and it was from one of the lionesses on the England women's football team, and she'd said she had massive period anxiety when playing for the lionesses. And I don't do much sport really, but even now, as a grown adult, as a mum, I still get period anxiety. I'm always conscious that, I can't wear that because I'm on a period, and that's just really resonated with me, what you've said about how things need to change. And we don't often think about ourselves, do we? It's often when we become a mum to girls and then they start their period. That's what was like a massive change in my brain for me, was when my eldest started her period, and I was like, right, hang on a minute, I need to be doing more here to educate her, to talk to her, to just give her more options, and kind of not have to go through the same things that we had to go through.
Exactly. And that sums it up, Emma, exactly. Because I think what happened was, I guess we come from we have our own mothers who are now kind of grandmothers of our children, and it was hardship for them, really. If you look at the evolution of even period products, like they were lucky kind of, because they were starting to come into that stage where, they had, they used to wear this belt, and then it didn't stick in their underwear or anything. It was the kind of two loops, one loop at the top, one loop at the bottom, and they'd wear a belt, and that's what they wore. Yeah. And that was a massive advancement, that they weren't wearing what they used to, where the name rags kind of came from. But then I suppose our generation then accepted so much. We just kind of thought, well, sure, that's the way it is. That's just the way it is. And that's what happens to girls. And I was talking to some teachers, because we're doing an initiative here, actually, next week. It's called the Buttoned Up Initiative. And it's to kind of try and open up that conversation in relation to girls, especially kind of in that primary school where they start to get their periods, because the girls who get the period as young as 8. But the schools are kind of saying, oh, sure, there's nobody kind of coming up asking for a pad from the school secretary or from the school. We don't have school nurses here in Ireland, but they're not going to the teachers. And then the teachers went, oh my God, am I being really naive? They're not coming. Of course they're getting the period. Out of the school of 800 or 400, how many is going to get their period, first period maybe, or getting their period and not prepared, or don't have something in their bag? And that experience is what's happening. Then they're bleeding into their clothes, and that's their first experience of a period, of female health in general, that they do alone in a school, and then come home with blood in their underwear, may or may not tell their mom, probably hopefully will, or their dad. And that's your first experience of a period. Like, we can do so much better than that for our girls. We really do need to do better than that.
Yeah, and so she's fine with me talking about this. I've already kind of checked with her, but my elder, she started when she was at school, but she kind of hadn't really realised, and then she came home. I was just rushing out of the door, and she'd gone straight up to the toilet, and I heard her shout, "Mama!" And straight away I knew what it was. But for me, that was like a really quite a poignant experience for me, because the first thing she did was shout me. The first thing she did was come to me for that support. So I felt really proud of that, the fact that she knew she could come to me and she knew that I would just support her. So what tips have you got on how to kind of help parents open up them conversations about periods? Because I know if it's not something you've kind of really talked about, we're dead open in our house. Like, my youngest tends to be the one that asks questions, so she'll ask questions and my eldest will listen in, but I'm always happy to answer everything. I try and answer, obviously age appropriate, but honestly. So periods is something that's just, I have periods, so they've seen me like in the toilet and stuff. It's not something that's kind of, they've been sheltered from. But I've spoken to some mums who they maybe don't have a period because they've got whatever contraception they use, or they're quite private. And I know that they've then thought, when it's come to the time kind of needing to speak to their daughters, they've kind of said, how do I open up that conversation now? So what tips would you give on that?
Okay, so I would be very much led by your child, because no one size fits all for some children. So let's put it this way: some are getting the period as young as 8, and then the average is in around 12, and then you might get your period until you're 15. So that's kind of the bracket within the expectation of when a period might come. So I would be led very much by your child about the stage of development they're at. Some children are particularly innocent. They might be 12, but particularly innocent. They believe in everything. The tooth fairy is still coming and all of that. But then there's a child that might be a little bit more ahead. So you kind of go by your child, first of all, and not a one size fits all. So what I would do is, say, for example, most parents kind of want to know where their child isn't talking about it. They're not even bringing it up. They're like, oh, I don't want to know about that now. So what you do is that if they're very kind of slow to talk about it, or they don't bring it up, you would say something like, you might be in the car bringing them to school or whatever else, and just say, oh, wonder now what age I was when I got my period. I wonder what age I was. I think you're kind of nearly start the conversation with, I wonder. So it's about you, but they're listening, and they may or may not say something. And then you might leave it, if you kind of get the vibe that, yeah, not going here now. Then you might leave it a while, and you might say it again. You might say something else about, God, like, yeah, so I was in wherever, and yeah, God, there's such an array now of period products compared to when I was younger. And this was, but say something positive. And that's kind of how you lead into it. You will have the child that wants to know absolutely everything, and that's great, and be honest about it and have an open house. And then what I found was really important is, if you can get to a stage where, like Emma, I suppose, like your house and my house, my husband has no option. Like, he says, oh my God, I have a wife, obviously female. I have 2 daughters, and she's no sons, right? So 2 daughters, a female dog, and now this period underwear everywhere. Oh my God. And he's so open about it. And because of everything that happens in this house and everything, the girls, the eldest one, I'm still the one that hasn't got a period. And then she's so comfortable talking to her dad. She said, Dad, I'm off period pain. Oh, Dad. And dads are brilliant, but not every girl. Like, I certainly wouldn't have spoken about my period to my dad. Like, that was just like a no-go area at all. But it is great where it can get to that stage, but you don't have to. And a mother and a dad, mom and dad, know their child better than anyone else. Emma, you know your child, you know their way, you know kind of what they're able for, what not able for. And that's the maybe a little issue that I do have when it's delivered at school. It's like it's a one size fits all, and it's great that it's done at school. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just saying that not every child is ready for the same amount of information at the exact same time. But the one thing, going back to it, if you find your child is not talking about it, you do need to get something across that they do understand. I would have them pre-prepared with something in their bag. Like I would have their pads, their tampons, maybe a period underwear, and like, you can get, obviously a small enough period. We do little period packs for the little kids. They're small, look like a little purse, and they put them in their bag, and you can make them yourself as well. And they just have kind of wipes. We have these kind of compressed sponges, compressed towel, and all these little things that you can clean yourself up, it just in case that a period comes at school, but just having that in their bag. And you mightn't even have had to talk, you mightn't even got to talk about it, but you have them prepared for it. That is the worst thing that can happen, is going to school and getting a period there and not being prepared, because that, as I say, we don't want that to be a child's first experience of something that they're going to have for the next 30 to 40 years. And I think that's a lot of the negativity that's around periods in general, is that kind of, because it has been such a bad experience to start off with. So yeah, so that's what I'd say, Emma. Unless you want to ask any specifics, I would go by your child, stage of development, and then if they're not talking about it, you introduce it by say, I wonder, and you'll ask some question, but you're talking about yourself. And that's enough to open that conversation if they're ready.
So what do's and don'ts of, would you say, do's and don'ts of things to say when they get the period? Because obviously it's all right kind of talking about it in the lead up to it, but then sometimes when they get the period, they might feel embarrassed, they might still not want to open up, that kind of, sometimes hormones and stuff and embarrassment, and you can kind of say something that's very well meaning and it just doesn't get taken in that way. So what would you kind of say?
So what I would say is that, you have very well-meaning aunties and very well-meaning grandmothers, and they'll say, oh, you're a woman now. Oh, that's great. Now you'll be babies, and like that's first of all, definitely not what you say. So to set the context for this, so you've your child and she's cuddling up watching something on TV with you, or you're watching a movie together and she's say 11, maybe 12, let's say, the average age. And she's your little child still. She's cuddled into mommy or daddy and she's watching the movie. And that night or the next morning, she gets her period. Can you imagine that if somebody turns around and says, well, now you're a woman now. You're a woman now. Like you'll be able to have the babies. Can you imagine? So you remember, she's still a child. That's the first thing you need to remember. She's still a child. She's still that 12-year-old, 11-year-old that was cuddled up on that couch the night before with you. And that's the way that your starting point. And saying to them that you can have the babies now, or you're a woman now, or welcome to womanhood, all of those things they don't want to hear. They're still a child, and legally they're a child until they're 18 years old, so like they're still a child. So I definitely wouldn't say something like that to them. And the other thing is like the expectation on growth, I find, like, because people kind of know that you get your growth spurt in and around puberty. Well, I find that parents sometimes don't always understand that a girl will only grow for 2 years after the onset of their period. It's like in and around, sometimes a little bit shorter, sometimes a bit longer, but in and around 2 years after the onset of period. Whereas boys that grow to their 18, it's completely different for girls. Your growth is gone after about 2 years after the onset. When you get your period, grow for 2 years and that's it. And it's just that, expectations that they're going to be a fine tall girl now, you're going to be a fine tall girl, and you're going to be grown now, you're 18, all of those things. It's just, they associate that with puberty as well. But it's just, and it's be not, try and associate that period with something really nice. So you'd say, the hot water bottle, the heated pack, the chocolate, we watch a nice movie, could change it to the jammies. So it's nice and soft and associated with something. Oh, when I get my period every month, mom, dad makes, an extra effort. Like it's lovely. We're snuggled up and nice and warm, and reassuring them, about pain control, just saying, because period pain can be very, very bad. And, that we'll give you Panadol and all of those things, all the nice things, all the things to look forward to, so that the period is kind of a positive thing that happens. Like, I know we don't always like show that to our daughters. Like I sometimes have to check myself and say, Jesus, I'm a period and my uterus is about to fall out or something, and I'm like, no, don't say that, Ellie. Don't say that, but like, just kind of avoiding those type of things. But the worst one is that association that suddenly they're going to be a bit different than they were yesterday. Snuggled up to mom, I'm no longer a child. You've got to get rid of that. They're still a child.
Yeah, and I think another thing I know that kind of always bothered me and would still bother me if someone said it to me as well is kind of about mood swings. And it's like, oh, is it that time of the month? And it's portrayed in such a negative way. And it's...
Yeah, absolutely. Like PMS and, oh, you're just moody because of that. Everything. It's kind of dismissive because we do know that premenstrual syndrome is a very real thing. It is a very real thing. It's not like you're putting it on or all that because you've got such a fluctuation of hormones. And, it's always thrown away as, I suppose, excused away even as the teenage years or whatever else. But that's it. You must remember your child, not like we're adults and we're able to express much better how we're feeling or maybe be able to put words on it. But this is a very new feeling for them. And when they get very emotional or they might feel very tearful or things that didn't bother them with their friends 2 weeks ago is now really bothering them. Being able to try and sit down and explain like that, this is, to normalize it in a lot of ways, but like also try and do things that kind of, help it as well. The research will show that lavender is very, very effective for premenstrual syndrome and just, essential oil in that way and different things that you can do. But just explain it to them that, talking to them and being a bit more, I suppose, present around that time. Because can you imagine if you're talking about something that you don't really understand what you're feeling? It's all very new. And then everyone is dismissing it away and saying, oh, well, then that's just you be moody now, or that's just premenstrual syndrome now, should be grand, you be grand. It's just like bringing them to the stage where they understand that this is, you can be very tearful. And that's okay, that's okay. And if you need to have a little cry or whatever else, or you don't feel in a great mood, that's okay. Just normalize it for them that it isn't something that they're going crazy because these are all very brand new feelings that they can't put names on.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's like that thing, isn't it, of like getting upset and then someone says, why are you crying? And you're like, I don't know. And it's just kind of accepting that. And it's, like you say, acknowledging it and saying it's all right. And another thing that I've I never did with myself, but since my daughter started her period and I've learned more is about resting. So I get really tired either before or after I'm on my period. And so I'm always really conscious of saying to her, like, if you're tired, just make sure you rest. When you're on a period, don't try and do too much. Just be kind to yourself, kind of acknowledge what your body's going through and just, if you need to rest, make sure you rest.
Yeah, exactly. And it's it's exactly that, Emma. It's like going with what your body is feeling, And the only thing that I would say is that, that they don't kind of use it as an excuse to stop maybe exercise. I actually just had that conversation with somebody yesterday where their child was using it as a reason not to sport or whatever. And I always kind of stay very positive around sport and say, so for example, I know that the research wouldn't show any connection between, being physically active and not suffering from period pain. But my anecdotal, I guess, experience of it was I just never had period pain, right, as a teenager. And it's because I was playing sport. It didn't matter if I had a period or not, I did play sport. And I think, the whole circulation of blood and the relaxation of muscles and all of those things really kind of helped me. So what we want is that it can very easily, if a child is kind of on that cusp where they're not that keen on sport and you're trying to encourage physical activity, that they don't use that as a reason not to. Now, I wouldn't be there with what we call in Ireland now, as anyone that's kind of got Irish mothers here in England will actually know, but we call it the Sally Rod. But you're not taking out the Sally Rod and saying, go on, now, do some exercise, even during your period, because there are days just don't feel like it. It's like it's not going to happen and want to be on the couch and left alone. And that's absolutely fine. You go with that. But just that it doesn't get anywhere near a stage where it's used as a reason not, keep up their sport if at all possible. Because that is a big risk, and if it happens once or twice a month, it can become a pattern. But going back in, I know it's a very different thing where you're going with your body and resting. Absolutely. I would be wrecked and I would need to sleep more. And it's just listening to your body and going with it. And a very important message for teen girls is, like, I was giving a talk to one of the schools there, and they were in the third year secondary school, say, here. And it was just letting them know that we have particular parts to our female body that's particular to us, like our ovaries and our uterus, fallopian tubes, and cervix and all the rest. And that nobody will actually in your lifetime come knocking on your door and say, "Oh, Emma, now it's time for you to come down to the doctors and have a check over or a medical check over." And nobody's going to do that. So you need to be empowered at a very young age to be aware, like, that we can, bad things can happen to, or, like cervical cancer can happen young and all of those things. And it's just being very proactive about being, seeking medical help and just even a check over from a very young age in relation to all your body, but in particular into your female anatomy.
So my next question kind of leads into that quite nicely. Kind of what's normal, and when would you advise to seek medical advice? So one thing that I've kind of seen crop up quite a lot is when a girl started the period, but then obviously initially she's not regular. So how long? I know it kind of differs for every child, but how long would you kind of think is normal between those first few periods, and when would you sort of seek that medical advice?
So you're right, Emma. It varies kind of for everybody what is normal, and like the first few years after getting a period can be quite irregular. So they can actually get a bit of a period, and then they might get 2 weeks, and they might have a little bleed again. Then it all kind of settles down. It becomes more regular, whatever regular is going to be for them. We have 28 days in our, I guess we kind of has that as the middle ground, but it can be 21 days, and then it might be 30 something days, and that's all perfectly normal for somebody. But the one thing, so just to kind of go back on it, first of all, to that if a period comes kind of at 8, I would definitely, even though we do see it, and majority of the time it's not an issue at all, I'd still like to see that little girl being brought to a GP just to make sure it's not what we call precocious puberty. That means very early puberty. And just make sure that everything is all right. It might be just a quick look by the doctor, but I'd still kind of advise that. And as I say, not something to be worrying about, but just something just a quick look at. And then if they're getting kind of the end of their 15th year of, and their period still hasn't come, still probably perfectly normal, perfectly within the realm, but I would still go and have that check just to make sure everything is all right with the hormones. And then we're very aware that if your body weight drops below a certain point, percentage of body fat, you lose your period. So sometimes we see that maybe in distance runner girls where their body fat just is gone completely, well, they'll actually lose their periods. And we see it also in anorexia nervosa, where you become so thin that obviously a period is no longer a priority, survival is, and they will lose their period as well. So we do know periods being gone, or amenorrhea as we call it, we know that's not normal. So just going back then to the kind of like day-to-day things that you might see that you're asking about there, Emma, would be like I'm always erring, I guess, on the side of caution with everybody, because I think it's a good, something good to give to girls at a young age is being that proactive, being that, I'm a little bit worried, I'll go see my GP, everything's fine, just rule it out or whatever else. So you would like to see, I'd say about a difference for everyone, but like about maybe 2 to 3 years it might take to settle down. Some might be settled down within a year, and someone might take 3 years to settle down, and might be getting a period more frequently, and then it'll kind of settle down to become. But if you've missed a period, I guess if you've had periods for a couple of months or a year, and then they've disappeared for maybe 3 months, whatever else, I would definitely see my GP. You just want to make sure that there's nothing in they'll just do a hormone profile on them. It's a quick blood test, and just make sure that, estrogen, progesterone, all of that is all fine, and that their hormones are all FSH and all of those things are fine. And just do a quick check on them, because that's what you're kind of trying to look at.
So something that I haven't really kind of seen talked about before, and you've obviously shared an article that you've contributed to this week that I thought really, really needed to kind of be talked about and given a bit of a voice. I wanted to kind of discuss the challenges for girls with additional needs or disabilities when they start their periods. It's something that I'd not really thought about until I spoke to you. Quite a privilege, I guess. But it's something that I know a lot of parents and a lot of the listeners will, it'll be something that they kind of will really benefit from hearing discussed.
Yeah. So Emma, the kind of backdrop to this is that I worked in a pediatric hospital for 8 years, and 5 of those, as I was saying, was in intensive care. But obviously, I think obviously you see more physical and intellectual disability with maybe a pediatric setting, whatever, in general. But I've always been very, very passionate about this area. And what I noticed was a very much when, like, I suppose I'm tuned in totally to periods now, was that there was very little, if anything, research in relation to periods and intellectual and physical disabilities. And then I kind of thought, oh God, that's odd. What, there's so much research in periods in general, but why is there not? So, like, can you imagine having an intellectual disability of some sort, or special needs of some sort, and you're nonverbal, or you mightn't be able to describe it? And we were talking earlier about being able to talk about premenstrual syndrome, and then your hormones are fluctuating, and you're feeling very tearful, and you have all these feelings, and you cannot express it. And then you go to, say, girls with autism and their mums. I work very closely with their mums in particular, and they would, describe instances where their child went to school, and obviously they didn't know what to do. So the child had got the period and they had a pad on, and then they went into the classroom, and then of course they have sensitivity issues with, some of them describe that they can actually hear the noise and the plastic of the pad moving, or it's the edges on it, or it's the sensation against their body. And that, one child, she took out the pad and she fired it out in the classroom, and then there was absolute hullabaloo. And now the school, in fairness, were dealing with it as best they could, but they were like, we can't have this happening. It's a biohazard, it's blood stained, it's in the middle of the classroom, and other kids are going, what the hell's going on here? And then they're ringing because the child's getting distressed, and then they're ringing the parents. The parents have to come and collect the child and bring her home. And then it's like, even with moms with girls with Down syndrome, say, for example, they would describe that their children are very afraid. Some of them are very afraid of blood. And you can understand that, because every other time when they saw blood, they'd hurt themselves. They'd fall and cut their knee or whatever. So suddenly there's this blood coming from a part of the body that they mightn't be able to understand or process where this is coming from. And this is going to go on for 1 month every year for 30 to 40 years. So, like, some of the moms say that, like, they would be trying to putting the period underwear on them, they would have to get them to look up at the ceiling, because they're so afraid of seeing any blood. But how we got around that, obviously, was the panels in the underwear are black, so they actually can't see the red of the blood, so they're not as afraid. So we kind of got round it that way. Then we, like with autism, we would work and do seamless underwear. So most of them can wear the underwear, funny enough, because it's something they've been wearing. So the advice I would give to any moms of girls with autism, for example, would be start getting them to wear whatever you want them to wear, like be it a pad, to try it, or ideally underwear, because it's just to carry on from what they've already been wearing. But get them wearing it months before their period, they expect their period to come, even though you don't really know when the period's coming. But get them start wearing them, so it becomes kind of their body is able for it, and that they've got used to the sensation or whatever, if anything's a little bit different with seams or anything like that. But going back to the challenges, Emma, it is awful to see it, and it had absolutely no voice. And I was like, every time I had interviews and everything, I was always talking about it. I was always saying, the challenges for girls with intellectual and physical disabilities, they have no voice, nobody talks about it. And I know for a fact how much those mums are suffering, how much more challenges those mums actually have. And those 2 mums that were interviewed in that Irish Times article were mums that I had kind of worked with and helped out. They'd come to me, they had said, oh, I hear you're doing this, this is the challenges I have, can you help me? And I said, of course I can. And we worked together to get something right for their child. But and it was like such a joy to see those children being able to go to school then, and their independence. And like, if you need somebody, you're in a wheelchair or whatever else, or you have a challenge, special needs of some sort, and you have somebody going in to change your child or your pad or, in a bathroom, your whole privacy, your whole dignity. And that really bothered me hugely. And like there is instances where that will always have to happen. But if we can kind of give back dignity, and they is entitled to their dignity and their privacy as you or I are. And that's what kind of really bothered me. So I kind of wanted them to be empowered like everyone else. So that was the point behind the whole super absorbent period underwear. Put it on in the morning going out. They went to school all day and then mum or dad or whatever changed it when they came home. But nobody had to do anything or go into bathrooms or take away their dignity. It's not that anyone's intentionally taking away anybody's dignity. But there's parts of us as private, and children are taught that. And then why don't they, why aren't they as entitled to that privacy as any other child is? And that's why I feel so strongly about that. And I was thrilled when Jen Hogan from the Irish Times came to write that article, because it isn't necessarily, a sexy subject or anything, but it's such an important issue. And if only people understood, and only the moms and dads out there that are challenged like that and have a child in the house they're worried about or whatever else that are going to get their period, they're the ones that kind of has the silence for them. And I just felt that article really helped. I had so many people reach out after it saying, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for, nobody wanted to talk about it. But, and I'm proud that Jen handed all to the journalist that actually, was brave enough to write something like that. Not that it was necessarily brave. She was delighted to do it. But, it's like, and fair play to the Irish Times as well for printing it, because I think it was an amazing thing. And I think we have made one step forward, Emma. We've a long way to go, but I think we've made a step forward in relation to that.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it's such an important article for not just, people to read, but for the parents that you've given a voice to. So I know we've kind of touched on it already was how can we prepare our children for starting their period? So I know we've talked about tips on how to open up the conversation and a few other things, but how can we prepare them for starting?
Well, the first thing I would say is, Emma, so usually around summertime, coming in now, May, June, I will be on this, what I call these mercy runs. And I'm being funny about it, but like it's, my child has got her period. How fast can you get me period underwear, swimwear? Oh, my child is going on a school tour. My child is going on holidays. And you feel like going, japers, did you not know that was going to come? All girls are going to get a period. So let's be prepared. You can put your hand in the sand if you want, but she's going to get her period. And it's all about that. I'm joking, I know, but like it's about being prepared for it. It's about having, whatever it is that you want to have in the house, in the bathroom, letting them know where it is, because it could come in from school or come in from somewhere and you're maybe not there. And it's having something in their school bag, in their sports bag. So how many girls arrive to their swimming lessons? We do swimming lessons through the schools here. Do you do the same over there? So they go during school hours for their PE or whatever, they do swimming lessons. But anyway, then there's this girl and she's sitting up along the side and all her friends are in the pool, and then the boys are coming over and the girls are going, how come you're not swimming? Why aren't you in the pool now? The reason is that she's got her period and she has no period swimwear, or she has no period bikini bottom to pop under her swimsuit, whatever it is, and she can't swim that day. And and can you imagine how you're feeling at that age, 11, 12, and you're sitting alongside her, maybe 9 or 10, you're sitting along the side and everyone's asking you. You don't have words. We'd say, you go out there and mind your own business, but the child doesn't, so it's kind of putting them in those situations. So the moral of the story is being prepared. The child is going to get a period, so have something in their school bag, have something in their sports bag, put something into the bag. They're going on a sleepover somewhere, and have something, in the bathrooms or whatever, and show them how to use it, because the amount of girls that even put on a pad, say for example, and they put it on upside down. They put because like what did we do when we could cut our knee? We put the sticky part, we put the plaster on. The sticky part sticks to the skin and it's got a little pad in the middle and it protects our cut part. And then sure, unless someone tells you, wouldn't you think you do the same thing when you have a period, to put the sticky part? And that's not very pleasant, as you can imagine, trying to pull off something sticky down there. So it's just even showing them how to use, how to kind of go through the, take off whatever and whatever. And then, period underwear is very simple. You just put it on as period. You put it on as your normal underwear. And they tend to like them too, because they're kind of, soft. And sometimes that's what you feel like even on sitting on. And in, telling them blood doesn't all come in one go. They kind of, 'cause giving talks to kids, I actually get all those questions. So does it all come out in one go then, miss? Does it all come out in one go? And you're like, no, actually, it's over, a couple of days, and it's only actually a very small amount in general. What they do, they think it'll all be all out in one go. And then, being prepared, like some children, not as much nowadays, but the kind of thing, bleeding to death, or something like that. And then explain about gushes, they might be sitting in school for 40-minute class, and we all know what that feels like. And then you go to sit up and you feel this gush, you think, oh, mother of God, like you're checking the seat, wondering and hoping that it hasn't come through. And, just letting them know, like, that the worry about period pain huge amount too. So, leaks for me is number one, they worry about the most, and two would be, does it hurt? Does it hurt, mom? And just kind of being honest about that and say yes, and explain why you actually get little, you get little cramps and stuff like that. It's the uterus basically contracting, it's getting rid of the lining or whatever else. Some people kind of have it worse than others. We do know probably why. We don't know why some people suffer and some don't. We know it's got to do with prostaglandins. I won't get into the whole science of that. But so just kind of but reassuring them, like, you have your hot water pack, you kind of try and I guess the non-medical ones first, the heating pack, the massage, the hot bath, the hot shower, all of those things. And then you've got your Panadol, you've got your Nurofen or whatever. And then just saying to moms and dads out there that if that's not really controlling period pain, we don't like to see period pain beyond that. Like, you can't have period pain for a Panadol constant. Panadol and a Nurofen or whatever, and the odd times. But if their period pain is bad, it's impacting on their days. They might be missing school 2 days a month or whatever. That's definitely not normal. We do not want to see that. So I would bring them to GP and just get an assessment done. They might try, as a first line, they might try something like Ponston, which is a prescription pain relief. Try that now. The only thing, Ponston can make them a little bit drowsy. You just have to kind of see, not very drowsy, but it makes them a little bit sleepy. So if they're trying in their exam years or something like that, just kind of have a look at that. But there are things that can be done. So just that they don't have to suffer with period pains every month and just take them out of their life, and it's actually really impacting on the quality of life. That's not like normal level of pain. So definitely see that.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please don't forget to follow, share with other parents you know, and if you haven't already, please leave a review on the app that you're listening on. A new episode is released every Monday. Follow or subscribe to be notified when each new episode goes live. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please get in touch via any of my social media channels, website or email. Thank you to our guests for joining me on today's episode. It's been great to have you, and thank you to everyone for listening.